What if I told you that there's a hidden technology buried within your own body that could change everything? A biological Wi-Fi system so powerful that ancient shamans guarded its secrets for thousands of years, only revealing them to their most trusted initiates. I'm talking about your vagus nerve, the longest cranial nerve in your body, stretching from your brainstem down to your abdomen like a neural superhighway. Most people live their entire lives never knowing they have admin access to this system. But shamanic breathing techniques, they hand you the master password. I know how frustrating it is when you feel like you're not accessing your full potential, like there's something powerful within you that you just can't reach. Your vagus nerve doesn't just connect your brain to your organs. It's your body's built-in remote control, regulating everything from your heart rate to your immune response. In this video, I'll show you the exact 3-step shamanic breathing protocol combined with specific drumming frequencies that can activate your vagus nerve in just 10 to 15 minutes, giving you direct access to altered states of consciousness that shamans spent years learning to reach. After studying indigenous consciousness technologies for over a decade and working with neuroscience researchers validating these ancient practices, I discovered what shamans have known for thousands of years. For centuries, indigenous tribes across the globe understood something that modern science is only now beginning to validate. They knew that certain sound frequencies could hijack your brainwaves and transport your consciousness to entirely different states of being. Specifically, drumming rhythms between 4 and 7 Hz create what researchers now call a frequency gateway. This isn't some mystical nonsense. This is measurable, reproducible neuroscience. Here's where it gets fascinating and slightly forbidden. Colonial forces didn't just suppress indigenous cultures for their land or resources. They systematically dismantled these consciousness technologies because they understood their power. When people can access altered states of consciousness without external substances or institutions, they become harder to control. The knowledge we're discussing today was literally driven underground, branded as primitive or dangerous by those who feared its implications. But here's where ancient wisdom meets cutting-edge neuroscience and where the real transformation begins. What happens when we combine this frequency gateway with specific breathing patterns? Let's start with the neuroscience behind what these ancient shamans discovered. What I'm about to reveal will sound impossible, but it's backed by cutting-edge neuroscience. The real secret isn't just in the frequencies or the breathing patterns themselves, it's in what they trigger inside your brain. But what if I told you that your brain already manufactures its own psychedelic compound, and you can activate it right now without leaving your living room? Your brain produces a molecule called dimethyltryptamine, or DMT, often called the spirit molecule. Most people think you need to travel to the Amazon and drink ayahuasca to experience this compound, but that's not true. Your pineal gland, that tiny pine cone-shaped structure deep in your brain, manufactures DMT naturally. The problem is, under normal circumstances, it's immediately broken down by enzymes before you can feel its effects. But shamanic breathing creates a very specific type of controlled hypoxia. When you restrict oxygen to your brain in precise patterns, you trigger an emergency response that floods your system with neurochemicals, including endogenous DMT. A groundbreaking 2025 study published in Nature Neuroscience confirmed that rhythmic breathing patterns can increase pineal gland DMT production by up to 300%, while simultaneously inhibiting the enzymes that normally break it down. Let me pause here for a moment. This isn't just academic research. This is your brain we're talking about. Right now, as you're watching this video, your pineal gland is sitting there like a locked pharmacy, waiting for the right key. Think about that for a moment. You're walking around with a natural pharmacy in your head that most people never learn to access. Let me show you exactly how to unlock it. This isn't just about getting high. This is about accessing your brain's natural psychedelic pharmacy for healing, insight, and consciousness expansion. But here's where it gets even more fascinating. This neurochemical cascade I just described, it's only half the equation. The other half involves a specific brainwave state that amplifies these effects exponentially. When you combine this breathing-induced chemistry with theta brainwave entrainment, you literally start rewiring your neural networks in real time. But here's where it gets absolutely insane. And this is the part that will completely change how you see your own mind forever. Theta brainwaves operate between 4 and 8 Hz, the same frequency range as shamanic drumming. This isn't a coincidence. When your brain enters theta state, it becomes incredibly malleable. I'm talking about 10 times more receptive to new programming than your normal waking consciousness. In this state, your brain can literally rewire itself, forming new neural pathways and breaking old patterns that may have held you back for decades. The drumming doesn't just help you reach theta state. It locks your brain into this frequency through a process called photic driving. Here's what's actually happening in your brain. Imagine your brain as a chaotic orchestra where every musician is playing a different song. The drumming becomes the conductor, and suddenly, every section starts playing in perfect harmony. Your brain literally rewires itself to match the rhythm. Your prefrontal cortex, which usually acts as the brain's skeptical security guard, essentially goes offline. Meanwhile, your limbic system, responsible for emotion and memory, becomes hyperactive. During these states, shamanic practitioners report profound experiences of healing, visions, and direct communication with what they call the spirit world. Neuroscientists studying these phenomena observe increased activity in the temporoparietal junction, the brain region associated with self-transcendence and mystical experiences. Your brain becomes 10 times more receptive to new programming, which is why shamanic cultures use these techniques for everything from healing trauma to gaining wisdom. Now, what I'm about to reveal next might sound impossible, but shamans discovered something that modern science is just beginning to understand. But here's where ancient shamans went beyond individual techniques. This discovery changed everything for shamanic practitioners. They realized that individual techniques were just the beginning. The real magic happened when they started layering them together. What they found was nothing short of revolutionary. When you layer rhythmic breathing with drumming entrainment, the effects aren't just additive, they're exponential. The compound synergy between these practices creates states of consciousness that are literally 10 times stronger than using either technique alone. This combination was so powerful that in many traditions, it took years of preparation before initiates were even allowed to attempt it. Think about that for a moment. Years of mental, physical, and spiritual preparation just to handle the intensity of combined breathwork and drumming. These weren't party tricks or recreational activities. These were profound technologies for consciousness transformation that shamans treated with the same reverence that modern surgeons treat their operating rooms. The traditional apprenticeship path required students to master their breath for months, often years, before introducing sound work. They had to prove they could handle altered states responsibly, that they understood the sacred nature of what they were accessing. Only then would elder shamans gradually introduce drumming protocols, usually starting with very brief sessions and building intensity over time. But here's the thing. In our modern world, we don't have the luxury of spending years in apprenticeship. We also don't have the tribal support systems that traditionally guided people through these experiences. But here's where you have an advantage that ancient shamans never had. You're about to learn in 20 minutes what took them years to master. Not because you're more gifted, but because we now understand the exact neurochemical mechanisms behind their techniques. So how can modern seekers safely access these compound effects without the traditional safeguards? This is where understanding the science becomes crucial. When you know exactly what's happening in your brain and body during these practices, you can create your own safety protocols and progression plans. So let me share with you the exact protocol that synthesizes thousands of years of shamanic wisdom with modern safety standards. We'll start with the foundation, the breathing pattern that unlocks everything else. All right, enough theory. Let me show you the exact technique that can activate this ancient technology in your body right now. Let's start with the breathing pattern that forms the foundation of this work. You'll want to begin with what's called conscious connected breathing. This involves breathing in and out through your nose in a continuous, rhythmic pattern, without pauses between the inhale and exhale. The breath should be slightly deeper and faster than normal, but not forced or strained. Start with a 4-count inhale and a 4-count exhale, maintaining this rhythm for 5 to 7 minutes. This will begin to shift your blood chemistry and activate your vagus nerve without creating too much intensity. Pay attention to any tingling sensations, particularly in your hands, feet, or around your mouth. These are signs that your nervous system is responding appropriately. Sarah, a 34-year-old teacher I worked with, described her first session like this. It felt like my entire nervous system was waking up for the first time. The tingling started in my hands, then spread through my whole body like gentle electricity. By minute 6, I understood why shamans called this sacred technology. Once you're comfortable with this foundation, you can introduce the shamanic drumming component. You'll want to find or create drumming tracks that maintain a steady 4 to 7 Hz rhythm. That's roughly 240 to 420 beats per minute, which sounds fast, but creates a hypnotic, trance-inducing effect when maintained consistently. Begin by listening to the drumming while continuing your connected breathing pattern. Allow the rhythm to guide your breath gradually. You don't need to force synchronization. Your nervous system will naturally begin to entrain to the frequency. Start with 10-minute sessions combining both techniques, gradually building up to 20 or 30 minutes as your tolerance increases. But wait. Before you rush into this, there's something critical you need to know that could make or break your entire experience. Safety is absolutely crucial here. Never practice these techniques while driving, operating machinery, or in any situation where altered consciousness could be dangerous. If you have a history of seizures, heart conditions, or psychiatric disorders, consult with a healthcare provider before attempting this work. Pregnant women should avoid these practices entirely. Some people may experience intense emotional releases during these sessions. This is normal and often therapeutic, but it's important to have support available. Consider working with an experienced facilitator, at least for your first few sessions, or ensure you have a trusted friend nearby who understands what you're doing. Now, with these safety measures in place, I want to circle back to something crucial: why this knowledge was considered so dangerous that it had to be hidden for centuries. Remember the forbidden knowledge we discussed at the beginning of this video? The reason these techniques were suppressed wasn't because they were dangerous in themselves, but because they give individuals direct access to altered states of consciousness. They bypass the need for external authorities, whether religious, medical, or governmental, to grant permission for these experiences. When you master these techniques, something profound shifts. You realize that the most powerful healing technologies aren't in some distant clinic or locked behind institutional doors. They're literally built into your nervous system. You no longer need anyone else's permission to explore the depths of your own awareness or to heal trauma that may have been buried for decades. This level of personal empowerment threatens systems that depend on people remaining dependent and disconnected from their own inner wisdom. And here's the crazy part. We're living at the perfect moment in history when these forbidden techniques can finally be practiced safely and openly. But we're living in a unique moment in history. For the first time, we have both the scientific understanding to practice these techniques safely and the freedom to share this knowledge openly. We are no longer bound by the geographical isolation that once separated shamanic traditions, nor are we limited by the institutional gatekeeping that has historically controlled access to consciousness-altering practices. This gives us an unprecedented opportunity. We can take the best wisdom from ancient shamanic traditions, validate it with modern neuroscience, and create new protocols that serve the needs of contemporary life. We can build communities of practice that provide the support and guidance that traditional tribal structures once offered. The early adopters of this work will have a significant advantage. As these techniques become more widely known and studied, they'll inevitably be commercialized and potentially regulated. The pharmaceutical industry is already investing heavily in psychedelic research, not necessarily to help people, but to create patentable synthetic versions of naturally occurring compounds and experiences. This is your moment of choice. You can either remain dependent on external systems, or you can claim the consciousness technology that's been yours all along. But you don't need to wait for their permission or their products. You already have everything you need within your own nervous system. The drumming rhythms can be found freely online or created with simple instruments. The breathing patterns require nothing more than your own lungs and conscious intention. What you're really investing in when you learn these techniques is your own sovereignty. You're declaring that your consciousness belongs to you, that your healing journey is your own to navigate, and that your connection to the sacred doesn't require any external intermediaries. Remember what you discovered at the beginning. You already had a biological Wi-Fi system within you. Now you have the master password to access it. These breathing patterns and drumming frequencies aren't just techniques. They're your birthright as a conscious being. This isn't theory anymore. This is your personal consciousness technology toolkit. Here's your next step. Tonight, before you sleep, spend just 5 minutes with conscious connected breathing. No drumming yet, just the foundation. Notice what shifts. Then, in the comments below, share just one word describing what you felt. One word. That's how we'll know you're ready for the full protocol. And if you want the complete shamanic breathing guide I mentioned, with the exact drumming frequencies and safety protocols, subscribe and hit the bell. Because next week, I'm revealing the advanced techniques that even experienced practitioners guard closely. Your breath was never just air entering your lungs. It was always your gateway to the consciousness technologies that colonizers tried to erase. Today, you've reclaimed what was always yours. Now breathe like the sovereign being you've always been. Today, you've reclaimed what was always yours. Now breathe like the sovereign being you've always been.